And we are recording. So Robert Glazer, welcome to the World Class Dads podcast. Glad you can make it, man.
Thanks for having me, Brad.
Yeah. Last time we chatted on my previous podcast was more on the entrepreneurship side and personal development. I'm sure some of that will probably weave in here too.
It's a lot of the same stuff. Yeah.
But for anybody who's listening who isn't familiar with you, would you mind just sharing kind of a high level background about yourself and kind of what you're up to?
Sure. I have sort of a day job and a night and weekend job. So my day job, and well, I guess if my family, that's also the night job too. My day job and the morning job. I run a partner marketing agency called Acceleration Partners. We're a global agency. We have about 200 people, and I founded that company about 14 years ago. And then there's a lot of things about Acceleration Partners in terms of how we grew and our culture and winning a lot of awards and doing things kind of very differently than companies that I became passionate about and started to write about. And so I've written, I think 4 books now. The latest one was actually about remote work. Again, an aspect we've been remote for a while. I have a newsletter called Friday Forward that started as a letter to my team and now hits a couple 100,000 people each week around the world. So I have a bunch of writing and stuff that I do outside of my day job as well.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, I would, I think forwarded Friday Forward, which I believe is how that
wasn't the original name. So that's how I came up with the name. It wasn't my intention. It just kept getting forwarded.
So. Yeah. Wait, so what was the genesis of Friday Forward and how did it grow to, how many people are subscribed now? If that's something you can share.
It's a couple 100,000 get it each week because it's put in a bunch of intranets and forwarded, and I syndicate on LinkedIn where I have a huge newsletter following. So it started as a note to my team. I was kind of working on my morning routine, kind of reading and writing something positive. We were 40 people distributed. So I decided on Fridays I'd write this note about wasn't related to business. And to make a short story long, or give you the short version, the people were sharing it outside the company, I started learning. And so when I learned that and people were asking me added to it, I had to create a newsletter system for it, but I tried to make it look like a regular email and ended up throwing a couple 100 names on because people outside the company liked it. And I thought they were all going to unsubscribe, but they all forwarded and told their friends to sign up. And it just sort of kept going from there.
I love that. No, it's an incredible newsletter. I've been subscribed for a few years now, and I recommend everybody checks it out. I think that you share so much value in there.
It's been an interesting year of, I was saying, like, a lot of my stories are first person experiences and I'm just not having them now. One guy was like, he's like, I need something more uplifting. And I was like, I usually have these like chance encounters and things that I'm like, I haven't left my house in like a year. So I'm not creating a lot of new experiences. So I got to go by what's going on out there.
Yeah. You got to go deep
yeah.
instead of all these experiences. But there's a few that really actually jump out, but before I jump into those, there's a few kind of baseline questions I wanted to ask you. One being how many kids you have and what their ages are.
I know I had to prep this because we all have our birthdays all within like a 3-month window. So I was like, wait, how old is everyone now? So I have 3 kids.
Yeah. If you get it wrong, you'll never hear the end of it.
Especially on this show, I have a 17-year-old daughter, a 15-year-old son, and a 12-year-old son.
Okay. Awesome. So a good spread there.
Yeah. My daughter threatened to come on this show and provide a counterpoint.
Yeah.
So when I actually offered her the opportunity, she wimped out.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I would have loved it. Well, so you have one coming up here on that 18-year mark. One of the newsletters that you put out, the articles was titled 18 Summers. Could you share a little bit about that concept? Because that with a young daughter really struck me, and I'm one summer down. So would you mind just sharing a little bit about what that idea
entails?
Yeah,
you're making me depressed. Thanks for connecting those dots. So 18 Summers was it's like a third, but my friend got an email from someone who was on a vacation who had this at his auto reply, and then it sort of tied with the Tim Urban post around where he realized that you basically have 18 summers with your kids. We have a family that goes to overnight camp, so that's not even the case. So I don't know whether that makes it better or worse. But and it was something about you had spent 80 to 90% of your in-person time with your kids by the time that they leave. And look, there's quality and quantity. I've been home working 8 hours today. My kids are downstairs. I haven't seen them, but we're in the same house. So, I mean, obviously it's not always time, but it was just sort of a reminder of what that window looked like and what that was going to mean about time that you had access to them. A lot of people, and I wrote another post, felt like they got a 19th summer this last year and they had college kids home, and people sort of repatriated that they hadn't expected before. And I think it's made everyone a little more, it's gone one or two directions. Nostalgic to have people home, or I know someone who just dropped her kid off at college and was like, there were no tears. We were all done with each other after 12 months of all being quarantined together. So, it goes both ways.
Yeah. Oh, that's hilarious. No, I think it's such a cool concept just to think through, like a good thought exercise, especially when you've got those kids that fall anywhere, really anywhere in that scale, but you start to realize how precious those years are. And
flexible. Like, if there's one advice I could give you, so my wife, like, she does these elaborate photo albums, but she's usually like 4 years behind. And so, which is interesting because by the time they're done, like, it's a good look back. And I was looking back, we took off and went to Australia, did sort of a sabbatical. Like, I think, look, there's nothing your kids are missing when they're younger. And it goes really fast. So doing those trips, like, I always feel like if you can do it, do it. You never know when you're going to have your health, if someone else in the family is going to be sick. Or I know a bunch of times when I wanted to do, because I'm always want to do script, my wife's like, well, we can do that later. We can go back to Paris later. Or look, we're in a global pandemic now. Something happens to someone. Like, I've never regretted anything that we have done with a family or miss school. And frankly, the teachers were like, they were really supportive. They're like, that's awesome that you're going to Australia. Like, they're in fourth grade. Like, they can miss 2 weeks of school. It's not.
Yeah. Wasn't there a story where you were offered Super Bowl tickets and you were going to pass it up, but what was that?
Big one that my son, I had gotten Super Bowl tickets to go with my father-in-law to the Super Bowl. And my son was like dying to come with us. We couldn't get him a ticket. And as we couldn't find a plane ticket. And as we were like literally getting ready to take off the airport, I was just playing around. I found these plane tickets, and then I found a ticket, and it was like a lot of money. And my son was 11 and we were already gone. And there was one flight that would get him there. So I had to call my wife and be like, he's got to fly by himself 4 hours, Boston to Texas. He was all in. I was like, this is kind of ridiculous. Why am I doing this? Like, there'll be other Super Bowls. Now, meanwhile, this was the greatest Super Bowl comeback in history with Tom Brady and the Falcons down in Houston. And I would have been very regretful. He and I were talking about it yesterday because we were saying, like, we said after the first half, they were getting killed. And we were like, this was still worth doing. This was fun. We were at the Super Bowl. Like, there was no regrets for having done it. I can tell you, if I could have had the chance to have him come and he didn't come, I would have, that is just this lifelong memory that we have.
So it just supports your point. Just do it. If you can do it and it works and the logistics are even possible, go for it, because you won't regret it.
I had to be at a conference, and this is a great example. There was this conference that was really important to what we were doing for our European expansion. And it was always before my kids went to camp. And so it was kind of a risk. I was like coming like the week before they were going to leave for 4 to 8 weeks. And my son was going away to camp. And so I said to my wife, I was like, I kind of need to be there in Amsterdam, but what we should do, like, maybe we could, let's use a chance. Let's all go to Paris for 5 days. And then, we'll do that. I'll go to the conference an hour away. I'll be there for a day and a half. I'll fly back. And then you guys fly back the day before. You can get them ready for camp. And so that way I'll only not be with them like 2 days, but we'll have just Paris. And I remember saying at the time, it's like, why they're too young to go to Paris, or like, whatever, we'll do it again. We'll do it some other time. Like, I'm not sure we're ever all going to Paris. Like we did that. Like, it was easy to say we'll do that in the future, but there's a ton of trips. Look, you talked about the 18 summer. We had 3 or 4 of these trips that we really wanted we're planning, before my daughter went to college, and we just got wiped out of all of those. So, it's never guaranteed.
Right. And whether it's trips or experiences or different things that might even seem easy to do sometimes, You never know when that opportunity is going to roll back around. So you set the stage pretty well there that you are a busy guy, or at least at the beginning of the conversation, with your day job, your night and weekend job. Oh yeah. And the ever present, omnipresent job of being a dad and having a family. So that's actually one of the reasons, the main reason I started this show was that I was scared shitless going into parenthood, that like, how am I going to have time to go after my goals and chase the things that I'm professionally ambitious about, but still show up as an awesome dad? Because that has always been something that I wanted to make sure I didn't neglect, and that I really put in at the top of my priority list. So how do you, or have you structured your life when it comes to your family and then work when you do have so much going on? But obviously you are also a very intentional father.
Yeah, I it's this whole thing of balance that I don't believe in. I think there's sort of integration, and like perfect example, my kids they're on hybrid right now, so they're sort of opposite. And we have a place up in New Hampshire where we go skiing. So all winter I thought, oh great, on their opposite week we can be up there and we can ski and then go to school. Like this is gonna be great. And then my son made a basketball team, and so we couldn't do that. But basketball was canceled this week because there's sort of an outbreak, and so he and I came up one night and we worked the next morning, and then he had a 2-hour class break and we went skiing and we came back. And so just like a quality experience like that, or we figured out a way to integrate it, rather than, I think sometimes there's a pressure of just the volume or the time. I'm going to screw up this story, but someone told me this sort of anecdote once about, there was a dad who was closing this deal at work, and he basically, like, he was usually always home for dinner and he had kind of normal hours. He was closing this deal and he was really like out, before breakfast, and was home at 8, like just 45 minutes before bed, before they went to bed every night. And after 2 weeks, the deal's closed, and his kid says to him, like, so dad, next week, are you going to be on that same schedule? Or are you, is the deal closed? And I was like, no, don't worry. Like, the deal's closed. We'll be back on the schedule. And there was this like look of disappointment in the kid's eye. Like, what do you mean? And they realized, like, the dad was there, but like on those other times, he wasn't really paying attention. Like this night, he had a lot of guilt. He would come home at 8 o'clock. He would read a book. He would be engaged. So actually, like, those 45 minutes were better than all the other time. And so that's sort of my thing on the integrations. Like, I am busy. I have a lot of competing, interest in things. So how do I find the things that I'm important? Like, I love to ski. I like to do this stuff, and match that with my kids or the football, like, so we can have these, quality and meaningful, experiences. Because I can be here and not be present, a lot, or I can make sure that when I'm here, I'm very present. So I try to, I've given myself permission a little bit to like lean into like strengths and areas that I'm interested in and doing things I want to do with them. And like, look, I write a lot, so I edit. So, I'm the one who sits with them. My son and I edited his paper the other night for a couple hours, but there are things like I hate to do. And my wife likes doing them or doesn't mind doing them. And so I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Like, I was not a good student. I was your entrepreneurial creative kid, can't sit still in class, ADD. Like, parents' night for me is like torture. It's like bad flashback school. And I gotta sit there and listen to this pre-recorded speech about all of this stuff and sit there, all this stuff. And I just stopped going. I just said to my wife, I'm like, I don't enjoy it. I don't like it. It doesn't make me a better parent. Like, can I just check this one off my list and I'll harder at something else. But again, that's one of the things you'd be like, oh, I'm a bad parent if I don't go to parents' night. Like, I am that 10-year-old again in parents' night. I am not paying attention. I'm in a different room solving a problem that's not in there because it's not there, it's not really engaging. There's people asking questions who just, what if your kid's the smartest kid in the class? Like, then what do you do? And I just sort of like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to give myself guilt about it.
Yeah. Well, and you think just about like, at least I think when you say that quality over quantity of the good memories from my childhood, and it is those really high quality experiences. It's the quantity, I think, could be important as well, but without that, if they never get that that quality, then that doesn't leave those impressions and those memories.
Yeah. And if I think about sort of family values or my values, like one of my things is finding a better way. That's my sort of main value and purpose. So like when I'm doing things with my kids around getting better, like when I'm teaching them, like I'm not good with them, and my wife's so patient, like in repetition. Like there's things in parenting that require sort of like, support and repetition and consistency. And then there's things that require push, comfort zone. Like that's where we're kind of like a good complement. Like I'm better in that realm because that's the stuff that I actually like doing. And so I'm going to be, look, there's stuff that you always have to do that you don't like, but it's hard to fake it. And so it's going to be better. I'm the one like pushing them on the obstacle course and, doing that, stuff with them. And like I enjoy it. And those are the moments where like, oh, remember when you thought you couldn't do that? And we did that. Like, but that's very natural to me to do. I don't have to force that.
Right. So talking about values, I know you're working on a few things value related, but which I definitely want to talk about. But when it comes to values within, your family, I guess values for me always triggers like this. Okay, what are the company values? What's the business side of it? But since having a daughter, it's really put it more in the forefront of my mind of what are my family values that I want to instill and that I want to make sure that I'm a living example of. So how do you think of just values in general, and especially when it comes to kind of the family side and your personal values?
Some of the best family people I know have stolen all their corporate business principles and used them at home, right? The family meeting, values, like goals, all this stuff. To me, values just take the place of rules and they're more useful. So the stuff that my wife and I get really upset about is when the values are crossed. So, and we try to bring things back to values, not to rules. Because rather than giving a rule book, so our family values are sort of the three little, it's like be happy and healthy, be respectful, responsible, and resilient, and be kind. And if we're getting into a discussion, or like, let's say it's like one of my unnamed children ate 4 cookies when they weren't supposed to in one, right? It's not, oh, you broke a rule or whatever the cookie is. Like that is not being healthy. And being healthy is one of our family values. Like it brings it to a higher level principle. And the thing is, like, even 4 or 5 values can cover 500 situations and rules rather than a bunch of rules. And when my wife and I get upset, it is when you don't want to get upset of everything, right? Because you want to get upset about the big stuff. We get really upset when they are not responsible, when they're not respectful. I can't remember a case where they weren't kind, but because then they see like, wow, these are the kind of high stakes things for mom and dad.
And then when there is something that crosses those, are you relating them back to like when you're talking to them about it or yelling at them about whatever, however you react?
Yeah.
Are you relating it specifically to hey, these are our values? And
that's not responsible. Like that's one of the things that we really value. Like, and we go into it. It's sort of a little bit the why behind it. Because again, then it doesn't seem arbitrary. Look, there was a great story I heard from, I think it was Kevin Cruz on a podcast, and he was having a very similar discussion about values. And this haven't happened yet because my daughter's had her license all throughout COVID. So there's nowhere to go. But what he was saying was, and I could see this where he said his daughter was driving and was asking what her curfew that night was, right? And so he could have said, and he was thinking like 10:30, right? And so he could have been arbitrary with the rule. Like he could have said, oh, the curfew's 10:30 or it's 11 or here's the rule. But he said to her, look, honey, like I go to sleep around X time. I'm not really going to sleep until I know you're home safely. I'll be up wearing. So you tell me what time you think works for you and let me know. And she's like, I'll be home at 10. And whatever the moral was, it was a half an hour before he was, going to give her. But I was thinking that's such a great way of explaining, like, I am not coming up with this arbitrary rule for you. I'm just not going to feel until I know you're safe. I'm not going to feel safe. And it just puts it in a totally different light to a kid.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The other thing when I think about values that comes to mind, I'm sure familiar with the entrepreneurial operating system, EOS.
Yes, we use it heavily.
So the values is a piece of that, and you probably can fill me in on this then and probably know it better than I do, but I know that a core piece of it is implementing those so that the organization and everybody at the organization knows those values, celebrates those values, and understands them. Is there anything that you do like that on the family side, or is it just kind of a ever-present conversation of, these are values, or are they up on the wall?
Yeah, it's funny. In our yeah, we do have a board with them, but we got like an Etsy thing, with them on the way out. But nice. I think it's no different than the company in terms of like, are they talked about? Are they operationalized?
And maybe you could share, right? Actually,
yeah.
Since you use it in both situations, maybe you could share how you use it on the business side versus the family side.
Yeah. So again, I mean, I'm not looking at a list, right? I just told you what our family values are. On the corporate side, it's own it, embrace relationships, and excel and improve. And we interview for those values. You'll hear about them every day. There are shout outs for the value on our company call. There's core value awards at the end of the year. Like, they are the behaviors that are rewarded. We'll be like, Brad is a star. Look how he owned this. Or Brad is not going to last here 4 months. Look how he does not own anything, right? I mean, it is not about being painted on the wall because we don't have a wall. It's that you hear them enough. Like, you'll just literally hear them organically in conversation, and we have interview questions around them and stuff. So I think it's not that dissimilar in the family. You could put them on the wall, but it doesn't mean bleep if you don't talk about them, use them. Again, to my example before, like, eating the 12 cookies on dessert is not breaking a rule. That's just not a healthy thing to do, right? That's talking it in that context. Nor was that responsible, or otherwise.
Yeah, no, I love that. So what are you doing then? I know you have some things coming out around values. What are the projects you're working on that are specifically related to that?
Yeah, it's funny. There's a lot of exercises around corporate core values and figuring those out. And a lot of what I talked about in my book, Elevate, and sort of spiritual capacity and building your capacity is like, understand your values and build from that, because your goals, your leadership, all that stuff, you got to be aligned with your values. Most people can't articulate them, but they're there, like they know what they are. And so then everyone sort of is like, okay, well, how do I figure out my values? So I spent a long time doing it. I pointed people to keyword lists or research or exercise, but we ended up building a curriculum at our company that we worked on with our managers based on my experience, saying, here are the questions, here's how you do this. And then I finally turned it into a course and just released it last week. It's at corevaluescourse.com. And it's to help you discover your personal core values. Now, we do this exercise with people at our business, and they're like, well, why are we doing this about my personal core values? Because look, you got to understand them. First, you might be like, this is the wrong company. Like, I don't align at all. But also with your team, or if you're trying to align your team, you got to understand these things. Like, a lot of them run deep. There was a great example. Someone was able to articulate that there was a behavior that their parents demonstrated in their childhood that really embarrassed them. And that had become, the opposite of that had become really important to them and a core value as an adult. And they were getting overly upset at teammates who were displaying that same behavior, but who weren't understanding why there was a disproportionate response. And once they could articulate this, they went through their team and they're like, look, this quality is very important to me. I need you guys to know this. If you do things that sort of demonstrate you're not this, I am gonna kind of come down hard on it. And that solved a lot of problems.
That's fascinating. No, I love that. And that core values have come up a few times in conversations on this show, but I've never had a tangible tool to point people to, nor have the guests. So I'm excited that we've got one now that we could reference.
Yeah. And I'll just give you some tips from it. And again,
that'd be awesome.
For like, when you think of the family values too, they're all action oriented. I don't think one word values work. So if I go back to my family, like, be respectful, be responsible, be kind, like they're action, right? If you just say kindness. So there are a couple of things to me that sort of make a value, which is one, like, can you objectively measure that you're doing well on it or not well, right? So I could say, look, I'm being kind or I'm not being kind. I'm respectful. Like, if you had a performance review, can you objectively do it? And does it have sort of a differentiated point of view and a clear point of view? And then could you use it clearly to make a decision around, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if is it worded in a way that you could say, this decision is like the respectful decision, and this decision is a not respectful decision, so I'm going to go this way. Like, so one of mine is sort of long-term orientation, and so I sometimes can be like, look, I got this, this is way too much of a short-term thing. Like I'm going to go with a long-term choice, because if it's not clear enough to you to use it as a decision-making metric, then it's not actually actionable for you.
Yeah. Well, I think what you just said right there, I think is so important to as well, the decision-making attribute of it, because then when you're faced with challenging decisions that you do have to make, it gives you a lens to understand, how do I approach this? Because that's one of the things you quickly learn in, adulthood in general and in life, but especially as a father, that there's not always a clear black or white answer. Sometimes there's 100 different angles you could look at something, but without having those values to really filter it through, it makes it tough.
And look, you have good family core values if your kids call you out on them. Like, Dad, you're not being X.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't very healthy. You just ate like 2 buckets of chicken or fried chicken. So, and when they get old enough, they will do that.
Yeah. That's awesome. Did you and your wife work together on what those family core values were? Or is that just kind of an extension of what your personal core values were? How that kind of—
We actually did it with them. We were doing some family meetings, and look, the family meeting thing didn't super hold well together for us. I wish we were better at it, but we sort of brought the kids in and sort of talked about it, and then put some polish on them. So I think that any of the things I've seen that bring the kids into part of the process are important. Obviously, we got into this stuff later on. Had I been more advanced, then, when they were 12 months, they, probably wouldn't have had a say in it. But they were involved.
I love that. Changing gears a little bit, I did want to ask you about one of the other posts that you put up. And I think it was in the fall, about playing basketball with your teenage son. What's your mindset when it comes to playing ball with your teenager?
Yeah, I should go back to, so my I didn't articulate this until 2 years ago, but my overarching parental philosophy, and this is of not younger children, this is one you can is you can have anything you desire as long as you're willing to do what's required, right? So what I see is parents who, on both one end of the spectrum, right? Like, Brad, you can do anything. You can be a rocket scientist. You can be a whatever. Like, I got you, whatever. But no reality behind like what it takes to do those things, right? There was a speaker I once who got his kid to be a national wrestling champion. He just had a great speech. Like, look, if you want to go back to that tournament and win next year, you can. But like, here's what it takes. You got to wake up 6 o'clock every day. And he's like, and I'm not doing it for you. And he's like, and by golly, the kid did all of it for a year. And he went back and he won that tournament, and it just clicked for me. So on one side is the like, you can do anything, blah, 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 support. Right. And then on the other side is the like telling them what they can't do, or just, knocking them off the thing. So, it's my daughter's looking at colleges. I'm like, look, you could, if you want to be, go here. Here's what it requires. It requires this score, this thing, this amount of work, this. So I don't sugarcoat stuff for my kids. Like, I believe in being really realistic to them. Like, I will be your number one supporter. I'll pay for it. I'll put you in the class, but like, I'm not going to do the work, and you've got to want it. Right. It just be from me. So back to that. So this is about, basketball and my son. It's getting dark here as I talk to you. Let me just turn on the light here. My son and I have been playing one-on-one, and I don't let him beat me. Like, ever since he could really sort of play, I don't let him beat me. And I am hanging on by a thread. And
so you're still alive.
He has more skill than me, but I think I just have more will than him.
Yeah.
At this point, he is much better than me from the skill set. But look, once I lose, I'm probably never winning again. My time will pass. And when he wins and he actually wins, like, it's gonna feel really good for him. And to me, that's real life. Like,
Yeah.
I beat him a lot, but I win well, and he's learned how to lose well. And I think we have done so much damage. There's a great quote I like we should be preparing our kids for the path, not preparing the path for our kids. I think we have done so much damage, telling everyone they're a winner and, making them think they got things that they didn't and all that stuff, versus like getting them ready for the game that they're going to play, because other people in life aren't going to let them win at things. And
right.
and he's gonna be really happy when he finally beats me.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Prepare your kids for the path. Don't prepare the path for your kids. That's one.
There's been an entire generation of get the world ready for my kid's coming. Like put the guards on them, get the way, get the spikes out of the way. Like and look, COVID's a great example of this. Like I've seen the victimization parenting, and I've seen the sort of like, oh my God, my poor kid, they didn't get their birthday. Meanwhile, these are the kids living in like beautiful houses with online school and plenty to eat and otherwise, and they didn't get their 16th birthday party. Like, that's the lesson you're saying to the kid, where like, you were entitled to all of this happiness and perfection and nothing bad ever happens, versus the parents are like, look, that sucks, but like, this is a global pandemic. We're really good off. Like, we'll adjust, we'll do something later, but we're not gonna like, I've just even seen it where everyone, they're letting these kids have parties of 8 or 9 kids because they feel so bad for their kids. So you feel so bad for them that you're doing exactly what the school asked you not to do. You're causing the school to be shut down like ours was this week. Like, how is that teaching like your kid a lesson about resilience and fighting through something and otherwise? Like, I'm not saying it's not bad or a tough time, but it's been very interesting, like, again, from a parenting where there's just too much empathy versus the parents that are saying, look, this is the world, this is reality, we're going to deal with it. There are people 100 times worse than we are. Like, let's focus on them. Let's not focus on, we didn't have the bling bling sweet 16 birthday party, right?
Yeah, with the pony and all. No,
yeah, you weren't. What made you think you were entitled? Again, that's the whole, like, the world, this global pandemic is inconvenient to the plan that I had drawn up for my child, right?
Right.
that is the sort of approach.
Oh, that's crazy. One of the values actually that I wanted to circle back to that you mentioned was that you have that value of long-term thinking.
Yeah.
Is that something that I feel like that integrates with this perspective of thinking about, okay, let's not just think about how it's impacting my kid right now, but let's look at how we're preparing them for long-term when they're out in the real world on their own. Do you see that kind of value in yourself kind of playing out at all in how you parent?
Absolutely. Like I'm playing the long game. I heard someone also say once, like, it takes 10 years to know if your kids were listening to you. Like, I think you could have your kids love you today and then be complete like disasters in the real world, or you could have them not happy with learning some of the more difficult lessons today, but be better off for it. I think the parents that are going for the instant gratification, one thing you should accept as parents is that your kids one day will be in therapy for something you did, for better or for worse. Right. and like, I actually, it's really interesting. I was listening to, I think Tim Ferriss maybe had Blake Mycoskie on a show, and he was talking about this work he had to do on himself. And he said, he went into his parents and he said, my mom was the most supportive parent, was at everything. My dad was, my grandparents, they were always around. I was the first child. So he was like the golden child in the family, super loved, supported, like awesome. And he basically became a narcissist because of it. And he said, there's nothing that they did wrong, but like, I couldn't talk to someone as an adult without them validating me and telling me that, like, so I would tell them about my company and how much money I made and all this stuff. And then I could have a conversation with them because I was so used to everyone being interested in me. And so I always think that's funny because it's a good example of, I think there's some parents who are like, oh, I'm being mean, I'm being too tough. Like, are you going for the best outcome in an hour, or are you going for the best outcome in 5 to 10 years? I am always choosing the best outcome in 5 to 10 years.
And it's such a good point too, that no matter what you do, there's going to be some issue
for something your parents did.
Yeah.
And so then they're going to be the flip side. Like, it's not avoidable. It's just a matter of which ways. I mean, some of the best, nicest, always there parents have some of the least functioning, like independent kids that I know. They're just, they got too much empathy. Like, oh, your shoe broke. Let me come to, you forgot your shoe. Let me bring that to you. Like, it just actually too much empathy and not enough. Oh, you forgot your shoes. Well, that sucks. Maybe you can't go to gym class today. Maybe you'll have to bring them tomorrow. Remember them tomorrow.
So that's kind of the empathy side. What about parents? And I think that it could be relevant for this conversation and this show, because folks who listen to this are interested in successful men who have also been able to show up as good dads. But you had one of your posts, and I just read through like 10 of your posts yesterday that I was so excited about, but it was titled, "Don't let your own financial success be a crutch for your kids." So I think that can be a fear of people once they do hit a certain level of success, especially guys who grew up without having parents who had that success.
Why they had the hunger to have that financial independence.
Right. Yeah. So how do you think about that, where it's this seems to be a fine balance of wanting to provide a great and memorable and amazing life for your kids, but also not trying to have that be something that they suffer because of?
It reminds me of something I read once about dyslexia, where you know how like dyslexic people, a lot of them are super high functioning. They develop all these other skills. So they interviewed a bunch of these very successful, best in their field dyslexic people. And they said, this dyslexia is the reason that I am so successful and all this stuff. And then they said, well, so would you wish that on your kid? Like, absolutely not in 100 years. So it's very interesting. Like, again, they couldn't, like, it would have become the driving force in their life, yet they would not possibly imagine someone wanting to have that sort of struggle or pain. And I think it's the same thing with money and resources, where, you know, we just, well, we can do it, so let's take care of it for them, or they don't have to work. And yeah, I mean, this comes back to value. What's the value you want them to have? Because the financial resources, look, I've generally seen that wealth has not created better outcomes with most kids. I know some families that have they were really focused on education around wealth, and that there was a lot of around personal responsibility and spending their own money and balancing their own checkbook. Now, whether that account had a lot of money in it, like, was a different thing. But I would say that is far the exception than the rule. And I struggle with this. I think a lot of people struggle with letting their kids suffer and struggle through those same things and have those experiences. I mean, my friend was telling me that his son graduated college, good college, like great school, top school. All these kids wanted to move to New York. They all wanted fancier apartments than they could afford, and they all had good jobs. The kids, and every single one of their parents was subsidizing one of these kids so that they could live in a nicer apartment in New York City than they could otherwise afford. And I don't think that's that's not a good idea. Like, you should live in a crappy apartment. So you want to live in a nicer apartment. Like, you should, like, learning how to live within your means is a really, I don't care what that means, is $1 million a year, $100,000 a year. So, but again, that comes back to values. What's your value? If you're, this gets into, are you passing on money or are you passing on values?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I was reading something recently about, Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank, Mr. Wonderful, about how he cut his kids off completely, 100% financially once they graduated from college, which I just thought was really fascinating. When you look at somebody who, I don't know his net worth, but is presumably quite wealthy, but just says, kids, all right, now it's time for you to figure out. I gave you the education.
That's my approach, right? Yeah, I will invest in them. Like, I will invest in their school or whatever, but and look, the one thing that my kids will have, and your kids and a lot of people, and look, this may hurt them anyways. They know they won't go hungry, right? They know they won't have a roof. They'll have a roof over their head. So they already know that they have a safety net.
Right.
And sometimes that helps people, but sometimes that hurts people, right? A lot of these people, the Kevin O'Learys and otherwise, probably there was no safety net. So I got to go make as someone once said, I got to go make plan A work because there is no plan B.
Right.
I even a lot of cases where I think there isn't an explicit sharing of wealth or otherwise, they're smart enough to know that, mom and dad probably aren't gonna leave them homeless on the street, right?
Yeah.
But there are a lot of kids who were going to be homeless, on the street if they didn't go make a living.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you oftentimes hear so many of those success stories. I mean, sure, it's survivor bias, but of those ultra successful individuals who had that just deeply ingrained hunger for success based on the lack or that they came from and the lack of resources that they came from, that, that was the option. It was either starve or get after it. And they did in a big way.
And look, like I said, I love to invest in my kids, right? So let's say that one of them came to me in 10 years and was starting a business. And they said, Dad, will you invest in my business? And I, well, tell me like what's going on. Well, here's the business. I like the idea. Okay. I'd like your, $200,000 and I'm going to pay myself $100,000 salary, in year one. Otherwise I'd probably be like, that's not going to, I don't see how to risk your part to make this successful. They said, Dad, I need a $200,000, salary, and I'm going to make $40,000 a year to get this work. And I've put $10,000 into it. Like, I would be happy to invest, alongside them again, that believe in them, but I'm going to want to see some skin in the game from them. Like, not them, because what you don't want them to feel like, let's say I wasn't their dad, like that. And again, this goes to one of my personal core values where I could just lose your money and, it's all good and move on. Like I would be devastated if I lost someone's money.
Right.
Like I would do everything I could to pay them back before I had any, gain from that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that perspective on it. One of the kind of questions that I love in the business realm is if you could hop in a time machine and give yourself a piece of advice when you're just getting started. But I like it even more in the fatherhood realm because I think it requires a little bit of introspection. Is there a piece of advice or pieces of advice, I won't cap it on one, that if you could either go back and talk to your younger self right when you were embarking on the journey of fatherhood, or even if you're talking to a new dad, that you might impart?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit what I touched on before, which is the do you, right? It is be you, do you. The stuff that you're passionate about is the stuff that you probably are going to get them passionate about and that they will become passionate about, right? I think don't think about what you're supposed to do, but think about, what it is that, you value most, like most, do most, and sort of, share those opportunities or invest in those opportunities, and give up the guilt a little bit. I think in general, we have to give up the guilt. We can't do everything, right? So that's probably, I would have probably taken that mindset a little earlier.
Are there specific things that where you've seen that play out, where it's the values or the things that you're really passionate and excited about that now you start to see those play out in your kids?
Yeah, like I invested a lot of time and a lot of money in getting them all to ski. Like my brother and sister are doing it now. I think the hardest thing is like it's so much work and exhaustion, getting little kids up to ski. It's like physically. So, they all ski now and are now like better skiers than me. And that's, for me, that was a real family memory, right? Like being up in Vermont with my family and skiing. And so we've recreated that. And I think that will become something that becomes, important to them.
That's cool. So this is just for my own personal knowledge. My wife just learned how to ski. I've snowboarded for years, over the past probably 5 years. And so now we're starting to think about, when do we get the little one on the skis? How old were your kids when you first put them on skis?
When I first put them versus they were first successful is a little different. But I think I put them all I tried them all at 3. But I think each one got faster, but probably 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love it. Um, well, Robert, you've shared a lot of great resources here that we'll make sure that we link up, and especially the pieces about the values and the course that you have. I'm excited to personally check that out. But are there any other places that you would like to point people to check out what you have going on, or follow along with what you're putting out in the world? Because I know there's a lot.
Yeah, it's all integrated. It's all together. So if you want to see anything, podcasts, books, courses, anything, it's all at robertglazer.com.
Awesome. And yeah, again, I'll just say a great first place to start for folks is, well, the podcast, of course, but then also just subscribe to Friday Forward. I've taken a lot of value out of it over the years. So thank you for the commitment that you've put into that. It's been awesome.
Great. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great catching up. Have a good one.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. We'll stop recording, but yeah.
That was good.